anxietycenter.com.
Who else would have a question or something they want to add to that, something they've noticed during that?
Well, this is Don. I'm calling from Southern California.
Hi, Don.
So, hello, everybody.
Hi.
And also, Carl, thank you very much for, just sharing. I resonated very much with so much of what you talked about and stuff. I thought, my gosh, I mean, I guess in many respects, it's exactly what I'm kind of going through. So, I do have some questions, Jim. Can I make an opening statement? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, and thank you for this group. I joined the Anxiety Center maybe, I guess, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So basically, my struggle with anxiety has been for about 30 years, and first contracted it back in about 1986. And in the early years, when there wasn't really much information, it was a really big struggle. But over the years, with a little bit more information and other things, that seems to be a little bit more manageable. And so I've had it off and on for all those years, and I had a what I call a really nice run, about 5.5 years of pretty good, and definitely some moments where it was more manageable. But literally about 7 or 8 weeks ago, it just came on again and kind of hit me full force, to the point where, as you say in the website, in the different chapters, the sensations and symptoms kind of overwhelm you, and then they interfere with daily life. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think, Jim, for the first time, or not, maybe I shouldn't say the first time, but I guess maybe after reading your testimony, and then also, beginning to look at some of the things that you would explain, in the chapters I'm on, like just finished chapter 4. It was almost like, it's like, how can someone possibly know exactly what I'm thinking or feeling, or all those kind of things, and just you really hit home with them. So that's always amazed me, and then it also kind of gives you a little bit of hope. But so I guess where I'm at right now is the question I have is does it matter how many times in a day where you would say, I accept this thought, or I accept this feeling, or I feel these sensations right now. They're simply sensations and feelings, and I receive them or I embrace them. Is there because I found like some days when symptoms are much more stronger, that I do it a lot, and I know that the whole idea is not to try to control the thoughts that come into my mind. So rather, so if I get a thought that it's like a crazy thought, I'll just say, hey, it's just a thought. I just accept it. And then I try to, move on. Or if I have, like this morning when I woke up, there's just a real strong sense of anxiousness, like throughout my body. And I just remember saying, okay, I just woke up, and I'd really prefer not to have to say, gosh, I accept this. I'd like to kind of start the day off, maybe on a more positive, brighter note. But I just found myself saying, okay, it's a symptom, it's a sensation, and I accept it, and I embrace it. And then, I try to maybe, do some breathing patterns and that kind of thing. So is it really a limited test of the number of times you should, say those things, or is that a good process to do, Jim?
It is. I mean, we want to be as passive about our symptoms as possible so that we're not reacting to them and causing more stress responses. So in terms of how many should we be doing, well, we want to tip the balance so we're being less reactive far more than we are being reactive. So that's all going to be helpful, is to take that passive acceptance approach to our symptoms for sure. But we also want to be identifying the areas in our lives where that stress is coming from, because passive acceptance is helpful in not adding more stress hormones to the overly stressed body already, but it doesn't really help if we're creating stress somewhere else. And that's why it's always the combination of reducing stress and going after the behaviors, so that we're reducing overall stress and we bring it down to a healthy level, and then we give the body time to catch up. So while passive acceptance is great, you want to, again, make sure that you're not creating stress other places in your life, and that could come from simply just being in a really hectic job. For example, if a person's run off their feet every day for 8 hours, well, passively accepting your symptoms is good because you're not adding more stress. but it may not be sufficient enough to reduce the stress that's causing from the rushing around. And so again, you want to look at the whole thing. Where is my stress coming from? How can I reduce that stress so that my body does have a chance to recover? I'm not going to react to my symptoms because that just adds more stress. So by by reducing stress and being passive acceptance, I can bring the overall stress load down. Excuse me, and my body will recover. So that's kind of the combination that a person wants to use.
Okay, so for example, like like a very difficult symptom for me is like difficulty concentrating and sometimes and focus.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like it's present. It's always present with you. So
Yeah.
so let's say if I'm trying to focus right now on what you're saying as an example, and it's hard to focus as an example, then some thoughts would come in. So I would probably want to say, okay, well, bring your attention back to what Jim is saying, and also just remember that you have your mind has been stressed out, and you want to come back to the understanding that that's stress hormones that are just happening right now. So acceptance of that. You see what I'm saying, Jim? Does that all make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yeah. Would I be incorrect in assuming that you're kind of a hyper guy?
Well, it's funny because everybody perceives me as this person who's calm,
Mm-hmm.
but yet I'm not calm inside. So yeah, I mean, rushing the play. I feel like that'd be a fair assessment.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And that happens too when we let our stress accelerate and ramp up over the course of time, because there's a physiological reason why that happens. When our stress goes up, it reduces the level of GABA, which is the body's sort of natural tranquilizer, and increases glutamate, which is the body's natural neurotransmitter that's responsible for stimulation. So these sort of change. And it's not that the imbalance causes us to be anxious, but that our anxiousness causes the imbalance. So, and those neurotransmitters are important. The other thing too that happens is that our overly excitable nature has the sympathetic nervous system always going. So it's like going, and the parasympathetic is kind of subdued all the time. And so we just get this hyperarousal thing going on. We call it hyperstimulation because it really is the stimulation. And so when we keep those things elevated, well, there's changes in the brain that happens. Certain parts of the brain become more active, and those certain parts are responsible for excitability, fear detection, and reaction. And the areas that become more suppressed are the cognitive and executive functions part of the brain, which helps us to think. So that's why we have difficulty concentrating, because we've got this hyperexcitability going on in the fear center of the brain, and our rationalization abilities have been subdued. So that's why it seems we can't concentrate. And so when we get to that state, well, our body just wants to keep going, because
Right.
as the body keeps it there, he wants to go and wants to keep going and wants to keep going. But this is where, again, we have to reduce our stress, deliberately slow ourselves down, so that that mechanism can shift back towards the normal relationship rather than the kind of unbalanced excitability relationship. And so, but as we continue to persevere with reducing stress, and as we continue to keep ourselves calm in spite of our symptom set, and yes, they can be distressing, and yes, they can impact our quality of life, absolutely. But okay, they're symptoms of stress. Reacting to them doesn't help. In fact, it makes them worse. So by underreacting, reducing stress, and then giving the body time, eventually the parasympathetic becomes more engaged, the sympathetic starts to disengage, and over the course of time, that balance comes back to where we're functioning normally again. But it's a process. It takes us a good process to get us stimulated, and unfortunately, we can get the body overly stimulated a lot faster than we can actually reverse the process. So that's why it just takes so long for the body to settle, because getting it down from a hyper aroused state is a lot harder and takes a lot more time than actually getting it hyper aroused. So
That's Jim. That's why, like, when I feel like, when I feel the symptom or the sensation coming on,
mhm.
in the past, years ago, I would, feed into it by more thoughts and creating a cycle. So that's why I thought, okay, so when I feel it now, just remember what the website says, just passively accept it. But again, I found that, sometimes it could be quite a bit throughout the day.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
And is that's okay or?
That's the normal. It's when the nervous system gets really cranked up, it can cause all kinds of havoc during the day. Yeah.
So again, I'm not. Forgive me if it seems like I'm trying to look for a number, because every day can be different.
Yep.
And I also remember you pointing out that, hey, listen, like yesterday there was a period of 3 or 4 hours where I felt like tremendous and had everything behind me,
Yeah.
and then 5 hours later, it just the floodgate opens again,
Yep.
and so I just remind myself that this is normal, and this is just part of that stimulation, and it's going to take time. But I just wanted to make sure that I was just doing the right thing,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
doing the right
Can I
doing the
just
right
say
practices.
something, Jim, just to help Dom?
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, Dom, is when you're better rested, you will have better days. So if you're sleeping good, you're meditating, naturally you're a lot more calmer. So I don't know how your sleep's been, if you've been meditating regularly, but if you do those things, naturally your days are a lot better.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. That's very, very obvious to me. So when I do sleep better, which is incidentally, 5 years ago, all of a sudden kind of stopped sleeping. I'd just be jolted awake all night long. So
Mm-hmm.
what I noticed, Jim, by the way, was I do, like deep breathing patterns and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And usually over the course of time, it actually can begin to help me fall back to sleep, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Because years ago, I wouldn't have done that, and I just would have suffered more.
Yeah.
Here would be my last question. I love to play pickleball, and so I mean, when I look at the things that I'm doing right, and Carl, thank you, by the way, for that.
Well,
I think to myself, okay, I'm receiving support, I'm getting, good information. Signed up with my health provider for some CBT. I do pickleball 3 times a week, and I try to do Zumba. And a lot of times I just go, even though I'm not feeling good. So I won't stop myself from going, because I think it's better just to do the exercise. And so I put in a lot of stress practices. But for example, like yesterday, when I'm playing pickleball, it's like there was a dissociation. So when you call out the score, like, okay, the score is 5-4. I'm serving on 2 right now. It's like my body's like over on the other court.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm playing pickleball. I want to have fun playing pickleball. I enjoy pickleball. I love pickleball. And
Yeah.
so, I'm just like, okay, just no matter what, just keep saying it, just even though you're disassociated. But then you find yourself, distracted. So then you're trying to pull yourself back around, Jim, so you can enjoy pickleball. Any suggestions there?
Well, that's always a tough challenge, because if if your exercise is strenuous, that is stressing the body. And so there's always a fine line between how much exercise is too much. I mean, we're obviously proponents of regular exercise, absolutely. Mild to moderate, absolutely. But if we're going beyond that, well, that's going to stress the body. So here's a case where we can be doing everything correct cognitively, and if the body's hyperstimulated, this rigorous exercises 3 times a week is going to keep the body's metabolism up and stressed. So this is, again, it's always a tough question for us to answer. How much is too much? You'll have to determine what that level is. But recognizing that strenuous activity is going to keep the body stressed, because it does stress the body.
Okay, because I mean, I like going back to what Carl said. I've woken up before and had a pretty good sleep, and then kind of light symptoms, driving down there, able to meditate, get out of the car, and the major symptoms that have been plaguing me just really aren't there. So I really, really enjoy it and stuff. And it seems like there's normalcy there. I mean, sometimes I play 2 or 3 hours, and sometimes I do feel like it's a little bit over, so I need to take a break and maybe have a banana, have some water, and that kind of stuff. But I always thought that maybe it was good to be doing those sort of things, because they're distractions, I guess. And I always thought that the distractions would be better working against your anxiety.
Well, distractions are definitely helpful, yes, but rigorous exercise isn't. That's
Okay.
the
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
So you might want to just dial things back a little bit, so you're not pushing your body so hard. So, and if you're playing pickleball and you're on the court on a regular basis, for 3 hours, that is stressing the body. And it is good.
Okay.
And you'll feel good after you're done because, when we're done, we had those endorphins going, the body's got a good workout, we feel relaxed. But where we pay the price is a day or two down the road as the body starts to recover from that. And if we keep on, every second or third day, keep on activating it, you see how that stress level is not going to come down. It's just going to stay high. So we can be saying all kinds of things to ourselves to keep ourselves calm, but those symptoms are going to keep coming because symptoms are symptoms of stress. If we keep the body stressed, it's going to present symptoms. That's just how it works. So this is where, again, we may have to dial it back. And we have to dial it back a little bit for a little while until your body is settled again.
Okay.
Now,
That makes
yeah.
that makes sense.
Now, when you're playing and you have symptoms, yeah, they're going to happen. And they can happen anywhere, no matter what you're doing. Our job is, yes, symptom, whatever, get through it the best we can. Sometimes, depending on the wave of the symptoms, because as you know, we can get waves where they're stronger than other times. If the wave
Yes.
is really strong, we may have to sort of need to take a break here and let this settle for a little while. Because what happens when the body gives us ebbs and flows of symptoms? You have to keep in mind that the body is self-regulating itself moment by moment. There's a number of systems in the body that are all interacting together to keep the body functioning at what it thinks is normal. And it does this by checking and balancing things and correcting things on the fly. And so, when the body's normal health and not hyperstimulated, it does a good job of keeping us there. In fact, we don't even notice all the changes in things that are going on. We might experience some time where we're a bit more tired than others. We might have a not dizzy spell if you've been out in the heat or whatever. We don't pay much attention because the body does a good job of keeping everything within the normal ranges. But when the body's hyperstimulated, it's trying to keep itself in a normal range, but that normal range is elevated to where it normally is. So you can have swings of intense symptoms as it's trying to correct, and you can have times where you have a dip in symptoms where you feel normal. All of this is what's going to happen when the body's hyperstimulated. That's why we put such a heavy emphasis on getting that nervous system cooled off so that the body can return to a normal level of stress, so that when it is doing its automatic homeostasis, which is the keeping it in balance, it's keeping everything within the normal range rather than trying to manage huge fluctuations. So that's what's going on.
Yeah, I can definitely see the fluctuations. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so when we get a big surge, it's like, okay, this is a big one. My body will get on top of this eventually. I just need to ride it out and I'll be fine again. If I react to it, I'm just dumping more stress hormones into the body, so that's not helpful. So I need to keep myself as calm as I can. And then when you get those moments where you feel great, it's like, okay, good. But don't count them they're going to last because, again, the body's just sort of finding its way through all of this. How we recognize we're making recovery is when those upswings in symptoms are rare and where our normalcy feels most of the time. That's when we know the body's, getting almost right back to normal. And eventually the body settles back to normal where we don't have any swings. But again, it's a long process of getting us there. Yeah.
Okay, I really appreciate that. I really, really do. Like with Carl, when he talked about like the rest and the aspect of it, I just recognize that's what I need to do. But I also feel like, I've created some anxiety because, I want to get back to where I was at.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself creates anxiety. Jim, being on this thing for the first time with you is anxious to me.
I hear that quite often.
Yeah, I mean, I feel this, again, a sensation, of a little bit of anxiousness. So by the way, while you're talking, I'm like, okay, I want to stay focused on Jim, but so I'm like, it's okay, just accept it. So that's what I did while I'm doing that. And this is my last thing, because I think I said the last time was my last question. But so Jim, if for example, if someone's talking to me such as you, and I begin to see my mind wander, is it wise just to say, okay, just make myself, I'm aware of it, just acknowledge it and say, just kind of come back to where you're at and just leave it at that. So, For example, if I'm watching a show and I feel some anxiety, I'm like, okay, that's a distraction. Just come back to the show. That's a good, healthy thing to do, right?
It is, yeah. And I like the gentle aspect. Yeah,
okay.
That makes all the difference. Okay, just move in this direction rather than say, oh, darn, I'm doing this again. We don't want to get down on ourselves because that's going to happen. But if we're gentle with ourselves and just sort of nudge us back on track, that's a really good approach, yeah.
And do I say just embrace your thoughts? So if I have like a feeling of anxiety, it's just say, okay, it's just a thought. I embrace it.
Yep, yeah. Because
you know why? Because when I say the word embrace, I feel like I'm accepting it.
Yep.
Or no, that's part of me. I mean, that's part of me. I'm like, I don't want the anxiety to be part of me. But I
Yeah.
guess it's really the opposite. By embracing it, that's what's more helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You bet. Yeah. It's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Jim.
Yeah. So you're doing, it sounds like you're doing those things great. I would, however, yeah, the CBT is going to be really helpful to it, similar to what Carl and I talked about, identifying what those behaviors are that got you here in the first place.
Yeah, I was thinking about calling. Yeah, they're not even able to see me until July 5th. But I thought I would call in. I was going to go through the list of your therapists and your coaches, and I thought I'd call in next week. That was kind of my this week or next week, and do a session. And because I really, really appreciate the fact that all of them have had anxiety, and some of them really severe anxiety.
Yeah.
And again, the CBT person they put me up with might have that. I don't know, but I did want to talk to someone, even like with you, for example. Just knowing that you've actually overcome something like this is, gives me hope and help.
Yeah. 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 And I think you might find it helpful. I mean, as you notice, all of our therapists have been through anxiety. That's one of the requirements to work with this, because it's one thing to know about CBT, but it's a completely other to have lived through it and have to have done the work to get through it. I think a lot of people who haven't been through it, who are trained as mental health professionals, don't understand the angst and the level of work that's required to recover.
Right.
Yeah, and that makes a big difference too. I mean, we always say at our website, it's not a fast process because it isn't. We often have so many behaviors we have to work through. Sometimes it can seem, insurmountable, but the good news is we can chip away at each one of them and reduce them all to nothing as we move forward. And that's why we're such big proponents of level 2 recoveries, because it's one thing to manage symptoms. It's another to get rid of them and stay rid of them for good. And the only way we do that is by addressing those behaviors that got us here in the first place.
Okay. Yeah. Is it okay to come back from time to time on this? How does that work?
Oh, yeah. Anyone's welcome to join anytime we have these. Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure having you, Don.
I
appreciate your questions.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're more than welcome.